Most interesting place in the world today, in religious terms, is Silicon Valley. Not the Middle East, not Syria or Afghanistan or Israel or Jerusalem, but Silicon Valley. This is where the new religions that will take over the world are being formulated. What is the main religion or ideology, worldview, of the world today, in the middle of the second decade of the 21st century? And I think we can say that the dominant ideology of the world at present is liberal humanism, or in short, liberalism. Liberalism is a worldview, an ideology, that thinks that the source of all authority and all meaning in the universe is the individual human, the individual of the species Homo sapiens. Liberalism has several core ideas. First of all, it believes in the individual. It thinks that every Homo sapiens is an individual, which literally means it cannot be divided. The meaning of the term individual is that you cannot divide it. The idea is, yes, of course you can divide the human body or the human brain, but within each individual there is kind of a seed of light, a spark, that cannot be divided further. Within each of us, there is this inner voice, and this inner voice in each and every one of us is the source of all the meaning and all the authority in the world. Whenever we face a difficult question, a difficult dilemma, choice in life, as individuals or as collectives, liberalism tells us, listen to yourself, connect to yourself. Try to hear this inner voice within yourself, and it will tell you what to do. And listen to that, not to anything else. The second main idea or hypothesis of liberalism is that this inner voice within ourselves comes out of a space of complete freedom. Yes, there are influences, constraints from outside, physical, social, biological, but if we go deep enough within ourselves, we will come eventually to a space of complete freedom. And from this space, we need to make our big decisions in life. Thirdly, based on these two ideas or two assumptions, liberalism assumes that only I can really know myself. Nobody else, no outside person, no outside system can really know who I am. Because again, who I am really is this inner voice which enjoys complete freedom. So I'm inaccessible from outside. Based on these ideas, the main value of liberalism, which gives it its name, is liberty, freedom. We need to preserve the freedom of the individual to think, to feel, and to act according to what he or she thinks and feels, because again, this is the supreme source of authority and meaning in the world. Now, all this may sound very abstract and very theoretical, so I would like to give a few concrete examples of what liberalism means in practice to our lives as individuals and as collectives. If you think about the field of politics, so what is liberal politics? What is liberalism translated into political terms? You get a democracy with elections and so forth. If we want to know who should rule this country, what kind of economic policies to adopt, what kind of foreign policy to adopt, to make war or to make peace, who should we turn to in order to get answers? We should turn to the inner voices of each individual. So we have elections, and on election day, everybody goes by himself or by herself, and at least theoretically tries to connect. I try to connect to myself to listen, what is my deepest feelings? What are my deepest personal thoughts about this issue? And I vote accordingly. And this is how we know who should rule the country, whether to make peace or war, and so forth. So this is liberal politics, which argues that the voter knows best. There is no source of authority higher than the voter. You get the same ideas also in the economic field. What is liberal economics? Liberal economics is the view that the customer is always right. There is no higher authority than the authority of the individual customer. How do you know if a product is a good product? If the customers buy it. There is no other method. There is no higher authority that can say, yes, they didn't buy it, but it's still good. We can say that the liberal package dominates most of the world. This liberal package contains human rights, which are these walls, defenses established to protect the inner freedom of each individual. This is the human rights. This package contains belief in individualism, in liberal democracy, in free market economy. And I think we can say that not everybody accepts this particular package, but it is the dominant ideological package of the world today. And there is very little viable alternatives or real alternatives to this package at present. Over the last few years, we have seen a lot of social protests in different places in the world, but the vast majority of the protests were done in the name of the liberal values, not against them. People were coming to the governments and saying, you don't live up to the liberal ideals. We want the politics to be more democratic. We want economics, the economy, to be more free. They didn't have, the vast majority of social protests did not have any alternative to this package. They simply wanted it to be implemented better than it is being implemented today. Another potential source for an alternative, which more and more people speak about, is China, the rising superpower of the 21st century. However, even though China is definitely an economic giant, it is still an ideological dwarf. In terms of ideology or religion, China have very little to offer the world, at least at present. In theory, officially, it is still a communist country, but it is very far from being communist in practice. And it has no alternative idea to either its official communism or to the liberal package of how else to run human society in terms of values. Maybe in the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, we will see the rise of a completely new ideology in China. China is extremely good in business, in making money, in making products, but ideologically, it seems to be bankrupt. The 21st century challenges humankind in new ways. We are facing enormous opportunities, enormous new opportunities, and enormous new dangers that we need to confront. To give just a few examples, perhaps the most important question in 21st century economics is, what do we need people for in the economy? In a situation when it is likely that computers will be able to do more and more things better and better than Homo sapiens, this becomes a real question. For the first time in history, the most basic economic value of humans is being put in doubt. And nobody really has an idea how the job market would look like in 40 years or 50 years, and what humans will still be necessary for, or at least most humans, what will they do? If there is a young man or woman today, say 20 years old, going to college and asking himself or herself, what should I study today so that in 30 years I will have a good job? Nobody knows what to tell him or her. Nobody knows. We don't have a clue how the job market would look in 30 or 40 years. And again, it's not even clear that it's not that there will be different jobs. It's not even clear that there will be any jobs for most humans. Another very big challenge and opportunity is concerned biotechnology. The possibility of extending human life and human health indefinitely, with 80 being the new 40. What will this do to society, to sexual relations, to family structures? This is very big questions. Another very big question which emanates from this field of biotechnology is the possibility of, for the first time in history, real biological gaps opening between the rich and the poor. Previously in history, there were always gaps between rich and poor, but these gaps were social, economic, legal, not biological. There was no real biological difference between the king and the peasant. They had the same basic physical, cognitive, and emotional abilities. Now, with the advent of biotechnology, we are facing a possibility. It's not a prophecy, it's not certain, but there is a possibility of real biological gaps opening and Homo sapiens splitting into different biological castes or even different species. These are the kinds of problems that we need to confront in the 21st century. And the problem of radical Islam and radical Christianity, Judaism, and so forth is that they have nothing relevant to say about these questions. They have no answers to these questions because they don't even understand the questions. If you read even very wise books written thousands of years ago, the people who wrote these books knew nothing about genetics, knew nothing about nanotechnology or computers. So how can you expect to get answers to these questions from people who didn't know anything about the subjects in question? Now, it's true that if you count heads, if you count people, there are many more people today on the planet that are interested in God and scriptures than in nanotechnology or genetics, or who understand these subjects. But history is not made by numbers. It's not that you need a lot of people to make historical changes. Very often, historical changes are made by relatively few numbers of people. If we go back to the last big technological and economic revolution that swept the world, the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century, it was done by very few people. Most people in the 19th century knew far more and were interested far more in the Bible than in steam engines or railroads or coal mines. The same thing we see today, we saw also in the 19th century. It was also full of religious fundamentalist movements. For example, in the Catholic dogma that the Pope, the papal infallibility it's called, the Pope is never wrong when it comes to questions of ethics, morality, and so forth. Similarly, in India, you had a religious revival led by Dayananda Saraswati, whose main idea, the main message Dayananda Saraswati had to the 19th century, to India in the 19th century, is that all the answers to all the questions are in the Vedas. In the holy scriptures of Hinduism, the Vedas are never wrong. All the answers are there. If you have any difficulty, open the Vedas or ask the Brahmins. Tens of millions of people followed him. The Islamic world, you had in Sudan, the Mahdi, in the late 19th century, which established a religious theocracy and also beheaded people and fought wars and so forth, caused a lot of stir in Victorian England when the followers of the Mahdi beheaded, executed General Charles Gordon, a famous British commander. Nobody almost remembers the Mahdi today. In China, the biggest war of the 19th century was not the Napoleonic War, was not the American Civil War. By far, the biggest war of the 19th century was the Taiping Rebellion, which started in 1850 when this person, Hong Xiuquan, he had a vision. God revealed himself to Hong and told Hong a secret, that Hong was actually the younger brother of Jesus Christ. And he had a divine mission to establish the kingdom of heavenly peace on earth, starting with China. Millions of people followed him, and they did not establish any peace. They waged the most terrible war of the 19th century, with at least 20 million dead. These are the smallest estimates. So you had your full share of religious fundamentalism also back in the 19th century. Nobody almost today remembers these people or these movements. They did not change the world. The Industrial Revolution did. Well, these people in Sudan or in India or in China were concerned about scriptures and God and heaven and so forth. A few engineers, and a few technicians and bankers and financiers in Manchester and Liverpool and Birmingham, they changed the world. They shaped the world in which we live today. Now, there was one ideological or religious movement which began in the 19th century, which did manage to change the world. And when we think back about the 19th century, and we ask ourselves what was the big ideology, the big ethical ideas that came from this period, we think not about Pope Pius IX, we think about socialism and communism. In 1800, there was hardly any socialists or communists, very few. Even in the middle of the 19th century, there was still a fringe group of bizarre people who have such thoughts. But there was one crucial characteristic about these bizarre people, like Marx and Engels, that enabled them to really change the world and to create an ideology that spread over the entire planet and helped to shape our life today. The crucial thing about Marx and Engels and later Lenin and Trotsky and all these fellows is that they did not just read old books from hundreds of centuries previously. They studied the technology and the economy of their own day. And they tried to create a new ideology which will be suited to the new opportunities and challenges of 19th century technology and 19th century economics. Lenin was once asked, in a very famous occasion, Lenin was asked by his followers, "Please, Vladimir, tell us in simple language what communism is. We are not going to read the Capital, a very, very dense book. We don't want to hear now this long philosophical talk. In very few words, tell us what communism is." And Lenin answers, communism? Communism is power to the workers' councils, the Soviets, plus electrification of the entire country. You cannot have communism without electricity, without the steam engine, without telegraph, radio, railroads. The communist system of production and economics demands these things. You could not have established a communist regime in 16th century Russia. Impossible. First, you must have an industrial revolution. Communism and socialism are built, custom built for the world following the Industrial Revolution. This is why they are so successful. In a way, communism and socialism were the harbingers of the new religions we see today in the 21st century, in the sense that they were based on technology and on the economy. After thousands of years in which technology played almost no role at all in religious and ideological thought, communism was the first techno-religion, a religion or ideology, if you prefer, that promises roughly the same thing that were promised by the traditional religions. It promised peace, prosperity, paradise, but here on earth, with the use of technology, not in the afterlife by the act of some divine power. This is the definition of a techno-religion. It promises whatever it promises here on earth with the help of technology. And communism was perhaps the first to show the way, and it completely changed our entire ideological discourse. Previously, the main dividing lines between people in their beliefs concerned questions like, do you believe in God? What God? Do you believe in soul? What kind of soul? What happened after death? These were the main questions that divided, say, Christians from Muslims and Shiites from Sunnis. After communism, everything changed. Now people more and more began to define themselves by how they think about technology and economics. Sounds very strange, but not very long ago, 30 years ago, humankind was almost destroyed in a nuclear war between two camps who were divided not in what they thought about soul or God or the afterlife. They were divided in what they thought about how economic production should be organized. So communism really changed the rules of the game. Even if you don't accept what Marx said, you started speaking in similar terms in the questions that you asked. And we see indeed that the traditional religions did not disappear. It's not that people stopped believing in them. They just became less and less relevant, less influential. They were transformed essentially from a creative force into a reactive force. In the Middle Ages, they were very creative forces. Much of the new technological, economic, political, administrative techniques of the Middle Ages were pioneered by the Catholic Church. The best equivalent for Silicon Valley in the 13th century is the Vatican. This is where all the new ideas about administration, about information processing, this is where you went, to the Vatican. The first archives, libraries, systems for archiving information, cataloging information. This is something the church was best in doing. If you're a king in the 13th century and you wanted somebody who knows how to handle information, to help you run your kingdom, you turned to monks, you turned to priests. They were the experts. So back then, there were still very creative forces. But in the last 200 years, they became reactive forces. They are still there, but most of what they do is react to the changes, to the inventions, to the discoveries that other people make. Like somebody invents the contraceptive pill and completely changes the sexual sphere, and then the Pope and the priest, they scratch their head. What do we do with this? Also, new ethical ideas. The 20th century is full of them. Perhaps the most important is feminism. After thousands of years of patriarchal society, we have the feminist revolution, completely changing social structures, families, and so forth. A very good way of grasping the changing place of these religions in the world is to ask yourself two questions. First, ask yourself, what is the most important discovery of the 20th century? And this is a very difficult question because there is a lot to choose from. Perhaps it's antibiotics. Perhaps it gave each one of you at least 10 years of your life, on average, you owe to antibiotics. It's a huge difference. Maybe it's nuclear weapons. Maybe it's a computer. Maybe it's not technology, but some ethical idea like feminism. Perhaps feminism is the most important discovery of the 20th century. Difficult question to decide. Now ask yourself a second question. What is the most important discovery made in the 20th century by theist religions? Religions that believe in God. Again, it's a very difficult question because you can't think about anything. What did these people discover in the last 100 years that changed our lives? Yes, they are still influential in the way that they react to the inventions and discoveries of others, but what new things did they discover? I at least can't think about anything which you can mention in the same sentence with antibiotics or feminism or nuclear weapons. So we see that the usual challenges that we think that perhaps there are still in the world to liberalism are not really challenges. But this does not mean that liberalism is safe, just the opposite. It seems that we are on the verge of the collapse of liberalism, and the collapse of liberalism will not happen because of things that people are doing now in Syria or Iraq or in Libya, but because of things that people are doing here in Silicon Valley and in Stanford University and in my university, in the Hebrew University. What kind of things? Well, it starts with the life sciences. The basic problem of liberalism today in the early 21st century is that the life sciences are telling us that it is nonsense. The basic beliefs on which liberalism are built were perhaps sounded sensible in the 18th century, in the era of Locke and Rousseau and these people, but there is a huge gap between what liberalism tells us about the world and about Homo sapiens and what the life sciences in the early 21st century are telling us about Homo sapiens. Liberalism believes in individualism, as we said earlier, that each one of us is an individual. We have this ray of light, this core, inner core, which is individual. This is a real self. Well, according to the life sciences today, there is no such things. All animals, including humans, are not individuals. They don't have souls. They don't have any essence. They don't have any inner core. They are basically a collection of biochemical algorithms, all kinds of algorithmic systems that build the brain, that build the human beings, the giraffe, the elephant, whatever it is. And if you peel all the layers, all the systems that make up an animal, an organism, like an onion, you peel one layer after the other, one layer after the other, in the end, you won't get an inner core of light or a soul, you will get nothing. There is just nothing left. When you take out all these different biochemical algorithms, nothing is left. There is no individual. Secondly, these algorithms, these biochemical algorithms that make up an organism are not free. There is no such thing as freedom, according to the life sciences. All systems in nature, including these biochemical algorithms, they work according to just two possible principles. Either they are deterministic or they are random. Perhaps some events on the quantum level insert a certain randomness into the biochemical processes of our brain, of our nervous system, of our body, but that's it. There is the word freedom simply has no meaning in the life sciences of today. Taking these two ideas together, that an organism, including Homo sapiens, which is just another animal, like the chimpanzees and giraffes and so forth, if an organism is just a collection of algorithms, and these algorithms are not free in any sense, this means that at least potentially an external system, an external entity, can understand me perfectly. It just needs to understand all the algorithms that come together to build this machine, this structure. And the crucial thing is, the crucial insight is that even our sensations, even our emotions, even our feelings, liberalism believes above all else in our feelings. How you feel about politics, about art, about sexuality. This is the holy grail of liberalism, our feelings. But now come the life sciences and say feelings are just biochemical algorithms calculating what? Calculating either of two things: probabilities of survival and probabilities of reproduction. That's it. The Homo sapiens, like giraffes, like elephants, they are calculating all the time. All their body is just a calculating machine for calculating probabilities of survival and reproduction. This again may sound a bit abstract, so I will give two simple examples. First of all, problems of survival. Let's say you are in a baboon, and you are somewhere in the savannah in Africa, and you see a tree with bananas on it. And you ask yourself, should I go and take these bananas? But you also see that there is a lion nearby. Now, should I or shouldn't I try and get these bananas and risk that while I eat the bananas, the lion will eat me? Now, in order to reach a good answer, what I need to do is to calculate probabilities, and I need to take into account a lot of information in order to do it correctly. I need information about the bananas. How far are they from me? Are there any obstacles on the way? How many bananas? Are they ripe or are they green? It's one thing if there are 20 ripe bananas, and it's another thing if there are just 2 unripe bananas. I also need information about the lion. How far is it? How big is it? Is it asleep? Is it awake? Does it seem hungry? Does it seem satiated? And thirdly, I need a lot of information about myself. How fast can I run? How hungry I am? If I'm on the verge of starvation, if my energy is so low that I may die within a few hours if I don't eat something, then no matter how big the danger is, I should try and get these bananas because otherwise I'll die anyway. If, on the other hand, I just now had a big feast, there is no reason to risk my life for these bananas, even if the danger is relatively small. Now, to reach a good decision means a decision that will enable me to survive. I need to take all that information into account and weigh it together somehow, calculate all the probabilities together. How do I do it as a baboon? I don't take out a piece of paper and pen or a calculator or a computer. I don't have it, and I don't need it, because my entire body is a calculator that was built for millions of years by natural selection to do exactly that. What we call emotions, sensations, feelings are simply biochemical algorithms that take all that information, all the huge amounts of information from outside and inside, and within a split second, reach a certain decision, a certain probability. Now, the result does not show up as a number, like in some futuristic science fiction movie that the baboon or the person sees a number in front of his eyes. No. The result will come up simply as a feeling. This is what feelings are. They are the result of these calculations. If the result is that I should try and get the banana, it will come up as the emotion of courage. I will feel very courageous, my chest will be puffed up, and I will run to the bananas. If the calculations reach the conclusion, reach the result that I shouldn't risk my life, the chances are too small, then the result again will not be a number, it will be a feeling. It will be the feeling, the emotion of fear. I will feel very frightened and run away. And sometimes the calculations are just in the middle. It's not clear if it's a good idea or a bad idea in terms of survival to reach for these bananas. And this too will show up as an emotion, as a feeling. I will feel confused. I will feel I don't know what to do. To take the bananas, not to take them. These two will be a feeling. The other type of calculation problems that this machine is built to calculate concerns not survival, but reproduction. And again, you look at, if you're a peacock, you look at a peacock. If you're a human, you look at a human. And you need to make up your mind, sometimes very quickly, is this a good mate or not? And again, lots of information floods in from the eyes, from the ears, from the nose, from within the body. And within a split second, you get the result, not as a number, but as a feeling. You will feel this is beautiful, this is attractive. Oh no, it's not beautiful, it's not attractive, it's disgusting, whatever. All these sexual feelings, again, they are biochemical algorithms. They are not some spiritual whatever that comes from the sky. They are the result of very, very complex biochemical algorithms that natural selection has evolved and selected for millions upon millions of generations until they came to us. Now, so far, these biological insights actually supported liberalism. Because liberalism, as I said earlier, it believes in feelings as the supreme source of authority. What I feel, this is the supreme source of authority on the planet. And biologists could come and say, this is actually a very keen insight. This is true. Because if you want to make decisions about your life, and you have two potential sources of authority, say the Bible or your own feelings, biologists will tell you, go with your feelings. The Bible contains the wisdom of a few priests in ancient Jerusalem. That's it. Your feelings contain the wisdom of millions upon millions of years of evolution. The algorithms that are your feelings have passed the most rigorous tests of natural selection. Each one of your genes and each one of your algorithms is here today because it has succeeded for millions of years to pass the most rigorous tests of natural selection. So if you need to make a decision, you better go with your feelings. This was the situation maybe until today. But now things are changing. In two ways, things are changing. First of all, biologists decipher the biochemical algorithms that compose our body and that are responsible for our feelings. They are no longer mysterious entities as they were before. We understand them better and better, why I feel this way in this particular situation. And secondly, we have computer scientists that are creating better and better electronic algorithms. Now, the question that arises today is what will happen once we create an algorithms that knows me better, that understands me and my feelings better than I can understand myself? What will happen then is that authority will shift. It will shift away from the feelings of individuals to these outside algorithms. For our feelings at present, you can say, are the best algorithms in the universe. But after all, they are becoming outdated. They appeared maybe the way that we have them today, maybe a few tens of thousands of years ago in the African savannah. So far, they have been the best algorithms around, but we are now at the position to produce an updated version, something better. And when we have better algorithms, then the authority will shift to them. This is already happening in at least a few fields of life, most clearly in the field of medicine, and decisions about your own body and your own health. I think it's not far-fetched to say that all of you who are now listening to this talk, including myself, the most important decisions about our bodies, during our lifetime will not be taken by our feelings, they will be taken by external algorithms. Algorithms that understand our own internal systems and that have statistics about millions upon millions of other humans, and therefore can make better predictions and better decisions about our bodies than just my own feelings. To give a concrete example, I think it was a year ago, or 2 years ago, that this very famous story came out with Angelina Jolie, that she had a double mastectomy. Why? Not because she discovered she had breast cancer. She didn't have breast cancer, but she went and did a genetic test of scanning her DNA, and it showed that she carries a mutation in one of her genes that, according to the statistical database, means she has an 87% chance of getting breast cancer. And she had a lot of breast cancer cases in her family. I think that her mother died in a relatively young age from breast cancer. Now, she did not have breast cancer at the time. Her feelings told her nothing, that she is sick, that she should do something. But the external algorithms told her, you have an 87% chance of getting this disease. So she had a double mastectomy, which is a very, very big decision to make in a person's life. And likewise, I think most of the big decisions we will make about our lives in our lifetime will actually be taken by such external algorithms, not based on our inner feelings. Now, when this will spread to more and more fields of life, liberalism will collapse, not necessarily violently, but it will simply become outdated. People will move authority to a different place. This has happened before in history, in the transition from the Middle Ages to the modern age. In the Middle Ages, at the time when the dominance was of theist religions, when people had faced a decision, a problem, the practical guideline they received was listen to scriptures. Read what is written in scriptures. This will give you an answer. Now, the rise of liberalism was not a theoretical change. It was not just a matter of philosophy. It was a practical matter of how people actually make decisions in their daily lives. If previously, when they faced a problem, say who to marry, they open scriptures and look for the answer, now, with the rise of liberalism, the guidance was listen to your feelings. Go maybe at night, climb a high mountain, look at the moon, look at the sea, try to connect to yourself, see what you really feel, and go with your heart, go with your feelings. This was a practical guidance. It was not just theory. Now we move to the next stage, when people say, don't listen to your feelings. What do they know? Listen to Google or listen to Amazon or to Facebook or whatever. They understand how you feel better than you know how you feel, because they have much more information and they have much better algorithms than what natural selection gave you. They have information not only about your emails and your books and so forth, but the latest rage is that all these biometric devices that you wear on your body and that get constant stream of information about your blood pressure and your sugar levels and whatever. And of course, do a DNA test and so forth and so forth. And if you have all this information and these superbly built algorithms, you can get much better answers than from your feelings, or certainly from the Bible. So we see the potential rise of a new kind of religion, a data religion. If previously God was in the center of events, and then humans were in the center of events, now data or information becomes the supreme source of authority and of meaning in the world. It starts with simple things, like you get to an intersection in the road to turn left or to turn right. Don't listen to your feelings, listen to Waze. It knows much better than your gut intuition whether to go this way or that way. Then you move to a more sophisticated level, what book to buy. I enter the Amazon website, I want to buy a new book, the first thing that happens is that a banner pops up and says, I know you. I know you, and I know that you and people like you will enjoy this book or that film. And the annoying thing is that they are often correct. They really know me better than I know myself. They can recommend the best book for me. So at present, it's still based on something quite not very sophisticated, like they know the previous books that I've read and bought, and they try to make an extrapolation from that. But now we are moving to a far more sophisticated level when the books start to read me while I read them. If I read a book on Kindle or some other electronic device, the device can know whether I finished the book, how quickly I read it, when I stopped in reading the book, which parts I read quickly, and which parts I read slowly. This is a wealth of information which conveys a very good idea about my experience of reading the book. The next stage is to connect this to facial recognition programs, and the book will know not only when I read fast or slow, but when I laughed, when I cried, when I was bored. This is an immense device that can, of course, help Amazon not only recommend books, but do many other more sophisticated things. And eventually we reach even questions like whom to marry. In the lives of most individuals, perhaps one of the most important questions is the question of who to marry. And now, instead of going to the priest and asking, Father, who should I marry? Or going to my parents, or trying to connect to my feelings and making bad decisions, I can ask Google, Dear Google, who should I marry? And Google will answer, well, I know you from the moment you were born, at least sometime in the future. I've read every email you've ever written. I've listened to every phone call you've ever made. I remember every failed date you went to. If you want, I can show you the graphs of your sugar level and blood pressure during every date and every sexual encounter you had in your lifetime. And of course, I also know your potential mates. Like if I have to choose between two people. So yes, I know him and I know him, or her and her, just as I know you. And based on all this information, and not only on all this information, but based on databases of millions and millions of successful and unsuccessful relationships, I can recommend to you at a probability of 87% that you had better go with A and not with B. And one more thing, I know you so well that I also know that you are disappointed by what I just tell you. I told you to choose A, but secretly you actually prefer B. And I also understand why you make this mistake. You give too much importance to physical appearances, to external beauty. Now, I'm not saying that beauty is not important. Beauty is very important, but you give it too much weight. In my calculations, which are based on these enormous statistical databases, I know that beauty counts for 9.62% of the success of a relationship. But your old-fashioned biochemical algorithms, because of things that happen in the African savannah, give this data, beauty, they give it 27.5%, which is far too high. So believe me, even though you feel that B is the right answer, go for A. And this is an empirical question. If enough people, enough time will consult and get a good answer that they will be happy with, then with time, more and more decisions about small things and about big things will be done in such a way. Authority will shift from the feelings, from the inner feelings of the individuals to the wisdom of these external algorithms. This is a very favorite topic in many science fiction movies and books and whatever. The usual plot of science fiction movies or books goes like this. Computers or robots become very powerful. Then there is a big war between humans and the robots, or humans and the computers. And the computers are so powerful, they know everything, they can do anything, but they don't understand the inner spirit of humanity. They don't understand love or whatever, and this is why humanity wins in the end. This is a very common plot in many of these movies because their audience is humans. So they have to sell this kind of fiction. Otherwise, people won't buy it, people won't like it. But there is a fallacy here, and the fallacy is that why do you think that computers or robots will not understand the emotions, the feelings, love, whatever? It's not some otherworldly spiritual thing. It's, at least according to the life sciences, it's an algorithm. So why think that a computer will not be able to understand an algorithm? Okay, it's a biochemical algorithm. It's not an electronic algorithm, but what's the difference? The mathematics is the same. The calculations are basically the same. What's the matter how it is actually, why does it matter how it is done? The second fallacy, which is part of it, is that most of these movies, not all of them, but most of them imagine it as a kind of war between humans and computers or humans and robots, when the far more likely scenario, which we are already seeing now, is not a war but a wedding. We are talking about a merger of the two kinds of algorithms, the biochemical and the electronic, not a struggle, or not necessarily a struggle. Now, there is one question that still hovers over this entire discussion, and this is whether the life sciences are right. Does life really mean nothing more than information processing? It may seem like it when you read the latest articles and books and discoveries of the life sciences, but there is still one big hole in the story, and this is the question of consciousness, of subjective experiences, what is called in philosophy the hard problem of consciousness. We now understand very well, we know how to find correlations between particular biochemical or electrochemical situations in the mind, or patterns in the brain, and certain subjective experiences. But we are very, very far from being able to understand how is it that a particular pattern of electrochemical signals in the brain creates a subjective experience of love or anger or hate or whatever. The life sciences are currently, most of them, have this dogma that, okay, we don't know how to explain it, but in 20 or 30 or 50 years, with more experiments, more knowledge, we will understand how electrochemical signals are transformed into subjective experiences. But at present, this is just dogma. Still today, we don't have a clue how electrochemical patterns can turn into subjective experiences. Maybe the life sciences have got it wrong. Maybe humans and other animals are not reducible to algorithms. This is an open question. However, in historical terms, it's not as important as you might think, because a religion or an ideology does not have to be correct in what it says in order to take over the world. We have many cases previously in history when religions and ideologies, which said what we think today to be completely erroneous things about the world, nevertheless managed to take it over. In scientific terms, the story, for example, that Christianity tells about the world, how the world was created, how humans were created, how things work in the world, it's not true. It's simply not true, at least according to science. But this did not prevent Christianity from taking over most of the world. So you don't need the truth to take over the world. Similarly, with these new data religions, maybe they are based on a misunderstanding of life, but this will not necessarily prevent them from taking over the world. Thank you.